Another piece that I think people will have a hard time explaining, and I don't even want to get in the conversation of fog lights right now. Law enforcement knew that the vehicle that drove by the house that night around this critical time period that fled at a high rate of speed right after we believe somebody inside saw a suspect who potentially committed these crimes matches Brian Kohberger's vehicle perfectly. The vehicle is never on Highway 270. It's never eastbound on Highway 270. Everybody wants to talk about Floyd's and fog lights and all this other stuff. It's a silly conversation because there's no reason to talk about a white car eastbound on Highway 270 because there's no evidence of Brian Kohberger traveling on Highway 270 during that time, as the narrative says.
Attacked the girls and killed the girls up there, then encountered Zainab in the kitchen on the way out, and she ran down the hallway and they chased her down and killed her and killed Ethan as well.
Kaylee's blood on the pong table, though, Dr. Turvey, destroys that theory. How do you respond to that accusation?
The beer pong table is boring to me. I'm not interested in that. There's so many other bigger issues to talk about. The beer pong table has no relevance in my mind whatsoever.
Is it me, or are we seeing a clear pattern here of these experts? Whenever we point out things that go completely against their expert opinion, they don't want to talk about it. Yeah, those fog lamps on the car at 254 there, Ray, kind of goes against all of your CSLI interpretation, doesn't it? Let's talk about it.
I don't even want to get in the conversation of fog lights right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Okay, I have a few questions, and only because I think we are going to receive some flagellation from our viewers if we don't go into these. I've seen reports and seen actually photos of them of 3 clumps of hair found in the 2 rooms. This is not cast off hair that shed over time. There's a clump of hair that is said to have been in Ethan's hand. And then there are 2 clumps of hair, one of which appears to potentially have roots attached to it between in the bed of Maddie and Kaylee, each of those. Do you know anything about those?
I do, and I want to qualify my answer before I say this. I recently released a book where I actually quote Dr. Turvey on some work that he has previously done, and I actually cite him as, hey, look at this guy. His statement about the hair on this case is complete and utter bullshit. And the day that photo gets released, I think he has incredibly hurt his credibility. Incredibly. The idea that Ethan is holding on to a clump of hair just isn't supported by the evidence in this case. There are very good crime scene photos that shows exactly what he's detailing. And I want, for your listeners, I want to explain very clearly what Dr. Turvey said. The manner of Ethan's death, he bled a lot. And he was leaning up against the wall between the bed and the wall, and his hand fell down in between the bed and the wall and is actually resting on the bed frame itself. Blood ran down his arm to his hand. When he was moved, there was debris that was on the bed frame that was now stuck to his hand in the dry blood. In that debris, there is a hair that looks a lot like Xana's hair that is there. There is not a clump of hair. Now, I have 4 girls. I've raised 4 girls. I challenge anybody who's female, who has their bed pushed up against the wall, who hasn't cleaned out or under their bed in a while, pull the bed back and see what is between your wall and your bed or down by the bed rail itself. Are we really talking about the fact that Xana's hair may be in dry blood on Ethan's hand because it's sitting on her bed frame in between the wall and her bed where things get captured like debris, and really going to write a book and make a claim that Ethan has the suspect's clump of hair in his hand? Like, holy shit, what are we talking about? Yeah, this is the most nonsensical thing I think I've heard on this case, and it blew me away that Turvey went there. And like I said, the day that photo gets released, I think he has a real credibility issue. And there's a reason the defense team issued the statement that they did. And I'm not going to get into that background, but I think it was 100% justified.
What about the clumps of hair? And there reportedly are clumps of hair that were on the bed with.
Of course there
Katie.
is. Where was the focus of that attack with those two victims?
Yeah.
It's the head.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that there's pieces of hair mixed in between these two bodies, and I'm not going to get into detail of what this crime scene looked like.
Mhm.
I would be blown away if there wasn't remnants of bloody hair there. If they didn't find bloody hair there, I'd be like, well, there's a problem. And the idea that somehow we can take this piece or this strand of hair that's dried in Ethan's hand and we can go find the real suspect, that's the most reckless thing I think I've ever heard an expert attest to, and he knows better. He knows way better.
Let me ask you this, though. It was significant enough to be excluded as Brian's. So it was at least
100%.
tested on some level. So
Microscope.
Sometimes law enforcement has to exclude evidence because of how it looks in court if they don't. I could not agree with you more. 100%. We see a piece of hair, and he made an issue of it. Of course, at that point, they're going to say, well, we'll prove it's not Brian's.
But
or
then
we'll test it against Brian's. But
it wasn't. Go ahead. Mark.
I was going to say, we also have to understand the testing that can be done. We don't have roots. It's a strand of hair. It's mitochondrial. We can only relate it by eliminating people on the mother side of that, the maternal piece. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we can send that to the lab and actually even develop a DNA profile is nonsense.
And so by that same standard, we can assume that or suggest that maybe it's a victim's hair, but we can't actually confirm that it's her hair either.
They could have related that it came from somebody on Xana's maternal side. And I kind of wish that maybe they would have done that testing because I think that would help clear this up. But, the idea that he's grasping or holding hair and that this photo shows him holding a clump of hair, I watched that twice because I couldn't believe what he was saying. And then I went back to my crime scene photos and I actually looked at it and I thought, man, if these photos ever get fully released, he's done.
They should be released so we can put this on the back.
I'm telling you right now, that was just an incredibly reckless thing to hang your hat on.
But the FBI does reference the hair in one of their reports. I know that at the beginning it's debris.
There is hair. There's no doubt that there's hair there. I agree with 100%.
Hair.
There's hair on a male victim who's in a female's room that looks a lot like the female's hair. 100%.
But it also is the same color of other people that I think are questionable. And it was my understanding you could test other than mitochondrial. You could test even if there wasn't roots. Is that not accurate?
I don't question the idea that we need to run that hair down. I question the framing that Ethan is holding on to a clump of hair, the way it was described by Turvey as, and it was very clear. Anybody can go back and listen to what he told you guys. He paints a picture like the suspect was tangling with the victim was tangling with the suspect, and Ethan rips out this clump of hair from the suspect as the crime is being committed. And that is not what is in the picture by any play of the word. And what a great piece of evidence for law enforcement. If that was the suspect's hair, like, man.
That is curious.
And I will say, there was a comment you made not too long ago before we got to the hair, and you said incredibly likely. And I will tell you, incredibly likely to me and probably the other two attorneys sitting here, that does not mean beyond a reasonable doubt.
Ruth Ballard. She is a PhD. Descendant Chapin's body at autopsy. Reference head hair was used for microscopic comparison. Now, here's where everybody is going to freak out on the hairs, right? Descendant Chapin's body at autopsy. FBI lab item. The FBI did these, right? They took the reference hair of Ethan and they took the hair from Ethan's right hand. Lab item number 3 that Whitcomb and Turvey said, well, that's some unknown person's hair. They didn't test it. Morphologically consistent with the descendant Chapin's own reference hair. Dissimilar to defendant's reference hair. FBI lab item 31, one hair from a left sock. Ethan Chapin's own reference hair is consistent. It's dissimilar to Koberger. Lab item 33, one hair from the bag covering Chapin's left hand. morphologically consistent with Chapin. Lab item 52, descendant Chapin's right hand, a hair, when he was transported for autopsy, morphologically consistent with descendant Chapin's own reference hair. Kernodle, reference hair, consistent with her own hair. So FBI lab item, a hair from a sweatshirt, consistent with Kernodle's own reference hair. Lab item 11, reference head hair used for microscopic comparison for Mogan. So you go to FBI, one hair from a hair tie, morphologically consistent with Mogan's own hair. Lab item 56, one hair on pair of pants, consistent with Mogan's own hair. Gonzalez, I mean, it's consistent with, where's it at? Hair, lab item, 2 hairs from a shirt, consistent with Gonzalez's own hair. Nothing in Koberger's house, car, anything matched anything. But my point is these, look, beanie and balaclava from Koberger's house. Nothing for Koberger. But these experts come out, and instead of talking about the L5 fingerprint, unknown male B that has mixed in blood with somebody else in it, unknown male D that has mixed in blood with somebody else in it, they don't talk about that. What do they talk about? Hair in Ethan's hand that the FBI did test, and it was Ethan's own hair. So this is how ridiculous our experts are, especially the ones out there running their mouth. And this is why I think that they're not out there to help this case. They're out there to stir up BS, and they're part of the problem, not the solution. Every one of the experts in this case are part of the problem.
Another piece that I think people will have a hard time explaining, and I don't even want to get in the conversation of fog lights right now. Law enforcement knew that the vehicle that drove by the house that night around this critical time period that fled at a high rate of speed right after we believe somebody inside saw a suspect who potentially committed these crimes matches Brian Koberger's vehicle perfectly. The vehicle is never on Highway 270. It's never eastbound on Highway 270. Everybody wants to talk about Floyd's and fog lights and all this other stuff. It's a silly conversation because there's no reason to talk about a white car eastbound on Highway 270 because there's no evidence of Brian Koberger traveling on Highway 270 during that time, as the narrative says.
Attacked the girls and killed the girls up there, then encountered Zainab in the kitchen on the way out, and she ran down the hallway, and they chased her down and killed her and killed Ethan as well.
Kaylee's blood on the pong table, though, Dr. Turvey, destroys that theory. How do you respond to that accusation?
The beer pong table is boring to me. I'm not interested in that. There's so many other bigger issues to talk about. The beer pong table has no relevance in my mind whatsoever.
Is it me, or are we seeing a clear pattern here of these experts? Whenever we point out things that go completely against their expert opinion, they don't want to talk about it. Yeah, those fog lamps on the car at 254 there, Ray, kind of goes against all of your CSLI interpretation, doesn't it? Let's talk about it.
I don't even want to get in the conversation of fog lights right now.
Okay, so this is Stephen Becker, and I mean, good grief. All right, so this is Stephen Becker, the defense's vehicle identification specialist. And his area is vehicle identification, photogrammetric video analysis. And he's got access to all of this information, Exhibit A, surveillance video, all of the FBI report, everything. And he starts everything off, background and testimony, and he starts it off right here with WSU. They found suspect vehicle 1, excuse me, northbound on Nevada Street, and then 253. He never once brings up Floyd Cannabis Shop. He does go to the FBI report, note all of their video. I'm going to talk specifically about the Main Street video. And he's got all the communications about when they received the videos, when they actually based their interpretation on the vehicle based on the videos. And he goes through and he notes where they have insufficient resolution on Linda Lane, Ridge Road, the Paradise Stills, notating likely a 2011 to 2016 Elantra. He points out in their emails, specifically pointing at the Paradise Stills. Turns out Paradise is likely where they came up with the 11 to 16. And he's got all the pins for all the video. So, I mean, he knows that they've got this video on at Floyd Cannabis Shop. He never, ever addresses it. And he knows they've got the Southeast Nevada Street and Stadium Way videos. He never addresses them. He addresses how the 1112 videos are not, legible, right? Here's Indian Hills. He points out how they're not legible. He doesn't put a lot of time and effort on the 1125 Ridge Road video other than to show that it's too blurry to really do anything. Videos from 1112, he notates how blurry they are. More videos from 1112, he notates how blurry they are. 1330 Linda Lane. 1320 Linda Lane. The Paradise Stills, he does acknowledge that it is similar to a Hyundai Elantra. If they would have looked closer on this, he would have been able to tell that the rear tail lights on that vehicle, once it got past the trees, was a continuous tail light that obviously had LED lighting, but he doesn't go into that. 1112 video again and how blurry it is. He notes this video at Ridge Road, and he notes that it's similar to a Hyundai Elantra, but then he tries to point out the Sonata and the Legacy, which we know that in the rebuttal to this, the FBI said, look at the rear window configuration in the Sonata and the Legacy, and I agree with them. Once you do that, you can clearly see that it's not a Sonata or a Legacy because of the window configurations. But here's what really drives me crazy on this guy. He did what most people I've seen on the internet do, is they go look up pictures of the Hyundai Elantra, and you can look up pictures of, like he says, this is a 2011 Elantra. So you look up 2011 and you'll see a bunch of pictures that they think are 2011s. But when you look close, this is not a 2011 Hyundai Elantra. This is the fog lamp configuration from a 14 to 16. It is a 5th generation, but he says in image 18, it's showing a 5th generation 2011 Elantra, and it's not. It's showing a 14 to 16, guy. You're a vehicle identification specialist, and you can't tell the difference between a 11 and a 2014 to 16. He did it based on just a Google search. And that right there just makes me lose all hope in our vehicle identification specialist, but that's not all. Because as he goes through, he's going to talk about the features and everything. And I agree with him. All the videos that he analyzed, you can't tell what kind of vehicle it is. But here's where we know how deficient the defense's experts really were. When we get right here, he talks about the 3:29 a.m. video sequence of the vehicle on 1311 South Main Street. The Sunset Mart vehicle. And he goes on to say the image displays the vehicle from the video. There is no timestamp for this video, but the folder's labeled 328. They had no idea. They couldn't do the math. All right. They could not do the math from the FBI. And I guess that's what they were relying on. The FBI was probably relying on the defense experts being incompetent. They couldn't do the math from the FBI agents because all he said was these videos. Look at this. The FBI report dated 5/1/2023 found the camera timestamps to be correct or within a couple of minutes for locations. So he just assumes, well, they're either correct or within a couple of minutes, so everything must be okay. And because of that, he doesn't dig in on the timestamps of the videos. And he just goes with what the folder says on this thing. I mean, come on, guy. The 3:29 a.m. video sequence, there's no timestamp for it, but the folder is labeled 3:28. So, that must be what it is. And if he would have absolutely known that, then he could have known that this vehicle can't be the vehicle that they say pulls into the neighborhood, starts making all the passes, and is one continuous vehicle, and they would have known it, I mean, beyond a shadow of a doubt. That is what drives me crazy about this. But also, he never addresses the vehicles on Indian Hill, on Stadium Way and Nevada Street, or Floyd Cannabis, where we locate the fog lamps. They didn't know about the fog lamps. The defense team didn't know about the fog lamps. That's why Cy Ray didn't utilize fog lamps in his analysis, and neither did this guy. And here's why the fog lamps on Stadium Way and Nevada Street are so critical and would have been critical to the Franks motion. This is why they would have been so critical to the Franks motion. And for anybody that thinks the fog lamps on the cars at 244 and 253 are immaterial, well, think about the argument that was missed in the Franks motion. When you go to the Franks motion, they're specifically focused on the probable cause affidavit. And the sequence of events described in the probable cause affidavit tells you everything. After reviewing numerous videos of suspect vehicle 1, the forensic examiner initially believed it was an 11 to 13 Elantra. Upon further review, he indicated it could also be an 11 to 16 Elantra. But it doesn't note the email he sent right after that saying, no, I don't like the rear tail lights. Let's go ahead and make it the 11 to 13. But let's just leave it at that and say that's legit. Okay, 11 to 16. There is some communication that suggests that. But that's all the vehicles in the King Road neighborhood that they looked at. Paradise, the 1112, the Sunset Mart, the Ridge Road, all of it. The best they could come up with was 11 to 13, at best 11 to 16. It wasn't, and this is the probable cause they should have been arguing this at. It wasn't until investigators were given access to video footage at Washington State University, located in Pullman. A review of that video indicated at approximately 2:44 on November 13th, a white sedan, consistent with the description of the white Elantra known as suspect vehicle 1, was observed on WSU surveillance cameras traveling north on Southeast Nevada Street at Northeast Stadium Way. Then at approximately 2:53, a white sedan, consistent with the description of the white Elantra known as suspect vehicle 1, was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street in Washington towards SR 270. SR 270 connects Pullman, Washington to Moscow. This camera footage, this camera footage from Pullman, Washington was provided to the same FBI forensic examiner. The forensic examiner identified the vehicle observed in Pullman, Washington as being a 14 to 16 Hyundai Elantra. This is where they got the 14 to 16. Was off the vehicle on 244 and 253, the one that we know now has fog lamps. The defense expert for vehicle identification never went back to those videos and looked, or he would have known that had fog lamps as well. And then how great would this argument would have been? Well, you can't tell me because the car over there is at 11 to 16 or a 14 to 16 because your FBI agent used the wrong car to narrow down the search to Koberger's year models. But they didn't do that. They didn't even go over there and analyze the video. And then they didn't analyze the video that they connected Pullman to Moscow with, which was Floyd Cannabis. If they had, they would have found what we found. Another still with the fog lamp shining bright. This is how incompetent the defense experts are on this case. And because he didn't do that, Cy Ray, when he did his CSLI analysis, he just went ahead and assumed the 253 car, I guess, was Brian's because he didn't have this information.
I don't even want to get in the conversation of fog lights right now. The bigger thing is there is a very specific route that is north of Highway 270. that goes actually over 95 to the east side of Moscow and then comes down to the south, and it would actually eventually drop you out on Indian Hills Road. Of course they would. I'm not aware of Moscow PD having a Honda Elantra, and that's specifically what I'm talking about. Is I've heard a bunch of scuttlebutt about an undercover officer driving a Honda Elantra on Indian Hills that night, and I think that's complete nonsense. Nobody's ever going to be able to back that up with actual evidence.
Well, you may be right about that, and I agree. I don't think it's the undercover cop car either, but I do know this. You're basing that entire theory off of actually about 3 prior trips that he went in this direction, according to your own report. And you're basing it off the fact that it runs into Indian Hills, yet y'all weren't quite sharp enough to do the math to realize that the vehicle that is seen on Indian Hills can't be the one that's seen going into the King Road neighborhood side. Number one, because up in the left-hand corner here, you know, YouTubers are able to obtain the video with a timestamp, but your expert for vehicle identification wasn't. So that was your first mistake. But since you couldn't do the math from the FBI report in relation to that, that was your second mistake. Because the FBI says the timestamp on this video is 1 minute and 43 seconds behind regular time, which puts that car in that right-hand corner going through this intersection at 3:29:29. Now, this is a car that you're saying just came from Indian Hills, based your whole theory on it, except for this. And you see, as this car you're so sure is Coburger's that's seen on Indian Hills, and it can't be any other car. Well, it's seen on the first video, and then the second video, and then the third video. And then you think it's seen on the Main Street video, and then it's seen on Ridge Road, and then goes right into that King Road neighborhood. But you see that discrepancy that you experts can't seem to figure out, can't seem to catch those discrepancies. Would have told you that the 3:29:29 actual time of this one right here makes it impossible for it to be the car next seen on the next camera. In fact, when this vehicle is seen going through that intersection, the car that you just seen on these other videos is already passing Linda Lane and about to go into the King Road neighborhood. When we look at the camera footage on this camera after this one, this vehicle never even shows up. So yeah, it's a less likely guilt side based on your totality of things, and more likely incompetent experts based on your totality of things. God, y'all suck.